All right.
Test.
I have too many gadgets. Dr. Saravanos, can you say something?
Greetings again.
Okay, thank you. Everybody can hear? Good? Channel 2. Okay, let's start. PowerPoint, please. Okay, so welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everybody had a good lunch and a good coffee break. And so today's session is about generative AI and education, harness generative AI to transform education for all. So we take a different approach. We take the approach of a system approach, because for the issue of generative AI, there are different perspectives to look at it. There's technical, so from our end, it's more of a whole society and multi-stakeholder approach. So I'll explain to you why I say it this way. But first, before I talk about that, I have to introduce my organization. So that's my job. So my name is Jingbo Huang, the director of United Nations University Research Institute in Macau. So how many of you have heard of a UN University? Oh, one, two, great. Three.
We've heard of them.
Wonderful, thank you, great. So UN University headquarters is in Tokyo. We have 13 research institutes in 12 different countries. We are the UN. We also have a identity which is academic. So that's why we do research and we do training and education. UN University. 13 research institutes in 12 countries, and we have different institutes covering different expertise. The one, as you can see, marked on the map. So those are the locations of our institute. So our institute that I'm heading is UNU Macau. It's specialized in digital technologies and sustainable development goals. Recently, in the past, well, we have been around for more than 30 years. Recently, we have been working more toward AI governance, AI ethics, extra, including in addition to digital tech with women, gender, cybersecurity, growing up online, extra. So there we have a huge portfolio. And if you're interested, we can talk later. And today's approach, as I mentioned, is a system approach to talk about generative AI and education, multi-stakeholder. So when we talk about generative AI, we certainly will look at the system itself, but beyond system, and usually, the system or the technical background is usually less important, I would consider so, than people. So people have to be in the center. So let's look at the people picture. So on the right side, you can see that there are teachers, certainly, and teachers have to be, they have been taking advantage of the tools and trying to develop personalized education tools and using generative AI. And we also have learners, the students, and maybe nowadays we talk about the lifelong learners. It's actually everybody has been using it. And we also look at the schools, school administrators, for example, universities. Now with generative AI, which transforms how we learn and how we teach drastically, and what kind of a curriculum would be relevant? How do we train people for the future generation? So those are the questions that the university administration needs to think about. And if we look at the bigger outer ecosystem, we also need to look at the policymakers, Ministry of Education, for example, and also the regulators. So today, of course, there are parents. I think some of you being parents, and you also understand, sometimes you want to know what your children are doing and online and with the generative AI. So this is also we have the technology company, and they are actually the ones who develop the technologies. With this people map, and I'm very happy to introduce to you our panelists, because we represent actually all the roles here. We also have researchers. So this is what I mean by a system approach or a whole society approach to discuss the generative AI and education topics. So I would like to introduce you to our wonderful panel. Uh, it's an alphabetical order. First one is Dr. Antonio Saravanos, and later you will see him online. He's a professor, associate professor of information system management from New York University. And sitting next to me is Dr. Eliamani Laltaika, and he's a judge of a high court of Tanzania. He's also a faculty member of Nelson Mandela University, and he's from Tanzania. And then we have a Professor Mike Perkins. Sorry, how to pronounce it? Yeah, that's fine. Okay. He's a associate professor and head of Center for Research and Innovation, British University, Vietnam. And we have Mr. Mohammed Sharif, and he is the director of Government and International Relations, OXICA, and he's also former Minister of State from Maldives. Unfortunately, Dr. Gao Shang cannot make it today with us, so we'll stay with the five people panel today. So the first one, I would like to ask our panelists. Let me take a seat. So we will have our presentation, and then later I would highly encourage you to interact with us, ask us questions, and share your practice and your best practices with us. So later I will invite you to speak. And so first I would like to. Can you still hear me? Yeah. So mine is breaking up. I cannot hear myself. The first set of questions I would like to ask Mohammed. Yeah. And Mohammed has been a state minister, a researcher, a higher education administrator, and now a private sector leader. So recently you have been working closely with educators of K-12 in Maldives. Would you please share how the educators in Maldives use generative AI in their classrooms, and what concerns and difficulties do they encounter?
Thank you. Well, let me start by thanking. I think for your presence here. I know there are many sessions going out there, but you've come here to hear from us. So as Jingbao alluded to, I had the opportunity during the last kind of year and a half to interact with educators in the Maldives, mostly K-12 educators, but also faculty from the main universities in the Maldives. Over the last year and a half, there has been an increasing interest of educators in generative AI. Now, AI for practitioners like myself and many of you, I'm sure, you generative AI is what really sparked this interest, and everyone's looking to uh, see how they can be supercharged with AI. And the same is true in the Maldives. Now, Maldives, you may not know, is a small island developing nation. Um, it's upper middle income nation, so it's not a least developed nation, but challenge through technology adoption. Now, when we look at over the last kind of year, I interacted with about 270. And the first thing I asked is, are you familiar with what is AI? And about 50% of them say, yeah, some idea what generative AI is. Maybe they're not so sure what generative means, but they kind of have a sense of, okay, this is something they need, this is something they want. So already, but then I asked, do you use it, right? And what I found was quite surprising that nearly 85% of educators in the Maldives already use it, but not as I hoped they would, but they use it. And for that reason, what I found was, so what do you do? I asked them. He says, oh, AI can make beautiful slides. This is the first thing, because creating slides is a big headache, I guess, for educators. And with AI, you can just give it your notes and it will create the bullet points. And if you have a better AI, it will even put it all into PowerPoint or whatever tool you want. So it is the idea that teachers are already taxed in terms of the time they have. But what I found interesting was that about 15% of educators, both in higher education and in K 12, were already using generative AI on a daily basis to teach or to aid them in their teaching duties. And this was surprising because I didn't really expect that they would be using this outside of, say, casual kind of exploratory work. uh, you know uh, but this is quite surprising. But what is even more surprising is that when I asked them, what are your concerns, because I thought they would be concerned, I thought they would be concerned with generative AI, because generative AI could replace them. But when I asked them, right, K-12, K-12 teachers, their concern was that they don't have the knowledge to leverage generative AI, and they don't have the training opportunities to upgrade themselves. And their second concern was, how can we access? The access to AI is limited. And and then their third concern was the accuracy. Now they are the teachers, so they know when they create something, they know when it's not accurate. But imagine a math teacher trying to teach something English. So they are really concerned about the accuracy of AI. And at the bottom of the list, they say, yeah, maybe only 2% of the respondents that of these 270 educators told me they have any concerns about being replaced. I think because at the top, they already marked too accurate. There is no risk of replacing us. But they see definitely there is. But when I ask the higher education, there is a contrast. The top concern for them is plagiarism and cheating. This is their concern. But plagiarism and cheating is like the fifth or sixth for K-12 teachers. For them, it's about their capacity. But for the higher education, the faculty, for them, the concern is, how am I going to assess these guys when they are going to be using AI's work as their own, trying to pass AI work as their own work, right? So there is definitely a lot of concern, but there is a lot of general demand for it. So now, like the Maldives, two things that educators are looking for: one, AI; two, how to keep children safe online, cybersecurity. So these topics have been in demand, and I think they go kind of hand in hand together. So this is kind of, and this is from a developing country. Uh, so I see a lot of scope in how, especially the fact that educators are putting at the top of their concerns their own capacity in the opportunities students have with, plagiarism, and how can we actually assess students who use AI. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. And this is very interesting. If the technician, please, can you please bring the Zoom, the Zoom? Yes. So we will invite our second speaker. Since Mohammed mentioned the plagiarism and the faculty members, how are they going to assess their students? Let's invite Dr. Saravanos, Antonio Saravanos, to talk about as a professor, researcher, and computer scientist, you can probably easily discern that your students submit work produced by generative AI, ChatGPT, for example. How do you teach your students to improve their generative AI judgment so they can better use generative AI to enhance learning? Antonios, please.
So you bring up an excellent point, right? Unfortunately, it's quite easy to detect the use of ChatGPT or another artificial intelligence, like an NL, specifically an NLP, right, and natural language processing, at the novice level, at the student level. For example, thinking back this semester, I was teaching an intro to programming course, and I would repeatedly see submissions where the solution used elements of the language. I was teaching Python, and elements of Python that we hadn't yet covered. So, and then when you have a discussion with the students, it's clear that they don't really understand um, what what the material is. So it's easy to catch them, and there are many ways to catch the use of AI. For example, when students submit essays, you see them citing resources that don't exist, and that's quite common for ChatGPT to just make up um, references. So I think someone more experienced, right, can kind of catch them out. And as an educator, I recognize the rise of uh, Gen AI tools like ChatGPT, right, is both a challenge and an opportunity in an academic environment. Um, so from the teaching approach that I have adopted focuses on reframing the challenges as opportunities in order to empower students and guiding them to use Gen AI not as a shortcut for producing answers, but as a tool to deepen their understanding, creativity, and problem-solving abilities. Because whether we want to or not, right, when they go into industry and they leave the university, they'll be relying on this tool, so they need to be able to use it um, effectively. Um, so um, I guess I would I have many dimensions to this, and we're a bit short on time, so I would say um, my foundation begins with helping the students understand the capabilities and limitations of the generative AI to begin with, right? So um, the first thing is to make sure that they understand that AI tools aren't like this omnipotent source of knowledge, and they understand that there are inherent flaws. So we we need to begin with that. And then once they have that, we can move forward. So to illustrate this, I'll present case studies in class where the AI outputs contain some mistakes, biases, fallacies, right? And then these examples become teaching moments. So first emphasizing the importance of the human element. So I may have students generate a solution to a coding problem with ChatGPT, and then the class goes over and critiques the solution with me, identifying mistakes. Um, but you could even generalize this exercise, right? So with respect to students, anything where you have uh, a Gen AI response being compared to some authoritative source like a peer-reviewed article, and then highlighting discrepancies and the challenges, right, to identify what the AI might have produced being flawed or incomplete responses, right? So this is what the AI gave us. How do we tell that there's a mistake there, right? So generating these metacognitive abilities, thinking critically, is where it's at. Um, Hopefully, this answers the question.
Thank you, Antonios. And so Antonios has been incorporating, embracing generative AI in his teaching. So let's move on to Mike. So one of your research interests is academic integrity. And would you please share with us some strategies for detecting AI-generated content in academic settings? Are the current tools effective? What are your insights on the responsible and ethical use of Gen AI tools in academia?
Thanks very much. And I'm just going to start off by saying how can you detect it? You can't. And I'm going to disagree with what Antonius has said there. Uh, Educators cannot effectively detect the use of Gen AI tools. There have been several studies which have demonstrated this. Earlier this year, University of Reading study found that 94% of test submissions which were produced using GenAI sources were not detected during the marking process. I've carried out experiments earlier than this. We created a series of GenAI produced assessments using GPT-4. We then submitted these into the piles of all of the faculty marking them. We gave them generative AI detection tools, and we said, just tell us if you spot any tools that have been used, any assessments that have been created using AI. Performance extremely low in terms of people being able to pick this up. Now, some of the comments that you do hear people saying, and Antonius mentioned about ChatGPT making up fake sources. Originally, ChatGPT 3.5, yeah, that was true. It's getting less and less true now. And now we have new tools such as Google Research, released last week, which actually carries out an agent-based search, creates a literature review from real web sources, and will produce a full literature review for you. So this sort of story that AI tools, you can always tell that they're going to, when we can detect them, it's simply now not true. I would really strongly recommend to say, if you think you're spotting a piece of work that you think's being created through GenAI, you may be wrong. Now you might say, well, okay, what I've got an AI detection tool. I've got Zero GPT or Turnitin. Also wrong. Other research that I've carried out, and many researchers in the academic integrity field, there's now actually a consensus that these tools are not suitable for accusing students of committing plagiarism, as we say. Now, you might say that, well, these tools, these software companies tell me that they've got a 98% accuracy rating. Okay, so you have 1,000 students. How many students are you going to accept that you falsely accuse of plagiarism? And you mark them as 0, you make them redo a course, they maybe fail an assessment, they maybe have to drop out of university. Is that acceptable to you? Certainly not to me. And the research that I've been carrying out, it really highlights time and time again that it's actually the students who are at most risk of being in a precarious situation at their institution. Maybe they're neurodivergent. Maybe they're English as a second language speakers. And these are the students who write in this style that people say, oh, that's GenAI. People write in lists, or people, write in a certain sort of structured way that, yes, sometimes GenAI tools do kind of replicate. But this is because they're standardized forms of producing text. And especially when you're an ESL speaker, you have often been taught in this particular way of using certain words in a certain format. So what you end up doing is you say, these students have been caught using GenAI tools and they're cheating, and they haven't. But then they suffer some really severe consequences. We've also got to really consider broader issues of inclusivity and equity and access for these tools, because you can make GenAI output, even if this is detected as GenAI produced, with a few simple techniques, you can turn this into text that is not going to be detected through any AI text detector. And we carried out this research. We created pieces using GenAI tools. We tested them against the 7 most popular and most research-backed AI text detectors, and we found out that simply they were very low accuracy to begin with. 44% accuracy rating for unchanged text. But if you're a student who's wanting to cheat, to get away with something, that's not how you use AI. You don't just copy and paste your prompts and throw that at the teacher and say, there you go. But if you do, you're probably a struggling student who needs more support, who doesn't need to be told, you've cheated and we're going to throw you out of university now. But you give me 15 minutes and a piece of text, and I will make that text completely undetectable. It might be 1,000 words, might be 2,000 words. We demonstrated that with a few simple prompts in terms of integrating these directly into our created prompts without manual editing, just by saying something like, write this in a more complex way. Add some spelling errors to this. Make this less complex. Make this sound more human. Add some burstiness to it. Change the sentence length. Change the paragraph length. What you're doing here is actually causing temperature changes in the underlying model. Now, if you have API access, you can actually set temperatures for the model, and you'll find a higher temperature will give you a higher variation, because we're talking about stochastic models here, which try and predict what's going to be the next model, what's going to be the next word in a sequence. But if you just change that up and you add in some additional words, you rewrite some sections, you're not going to get this detection that is going to be acceptable in really any formal academic integrity process. Now, if you take a look at the Guardian or Observer yesterday, I was quoted in there actually talking about this subject, and it's a really interesting article which talks exactly about these challenges. It's the students who get falsely accused, and these are the ones who are struggling. Or it's students who do admit to taking some shortcuts, but is that their fault? If they're using ChatGPT or other GenAI tools to do the assessment, why haven't you changed your assessment? Why haven't you changed your assessment to account for these tools? They've been out for 2 years now. What's going on? So I think there's some really big changes that need to be made in education more broadly to recognize these tools and see how we can actually integrate them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. You see? Thank you. So let's, well, we've been talking about academic integrity. Now let's move on to our lawyer, Eliamani. You're an expert in intellectual property. GenAI tools can be trained by items protected by IP. There is a significant legal uncertainty whether AI tools, their training, use, and outputs represent IP infringements. What are some implications on education?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Huang, for that question. Just before I go into the IP question, I want to appreciate the last speaker, Professor, for really opening this up. As a judge, I was trying to imagine getting a case where a student is suing the university for being accused of using Gen AI to produce their thesis, and they need their PhD, but they are told you cannot graduate because this work is from Gen AI, and I'm a judge. I need to do justice not only to the student but to the university and to the universe. And surprisingly, the professor has said it's impossible to detect. And that's kind of a very interesting entry point into what I want to speak. Because we are trying to take the AI thing so much hyped to the extent that we lose the tools that we were working before and trying that to reinvent the wheel. Um, Copyright has been at the center of education, and copyright is at the loggerhead with generative AI for several reasons. First, there is a saying in my language, ukiona vyaelea vimeundwa, which means whenever you come across something very impressive, you should be sure that someone has toiled to make it so. So anytime you put a prompt on ChatGPT or any other generative AI, and you get a wonderful text that suits your expectations, meets your expectations, to the extent that it cannot even be detected, like a professor said, you should be sure that it borrows heavily from what existed before. So the time that has been used to train ChatGPT and other Gen AIs is allegedly time that copyrighted work was heavily violated. So many people think, yes, this looks like a chapter in my book. I'm a professor of sociology. and somebody has just put a prompt, and the whole 5, 6, 10 pages are from my work. So there is a plethora of cases going to court, people saying ChatGPT has violated copyright, so that has an implication on education. Secondly, is an issue of attribution and ownership. Academia are known all over the world, academics, for generously acknowledging some other people's work. You find I was reading one paper when I was coming, and this professor has cited so many works. One page, half a page is footnotes. Trying to say this is from so and so. We are not seeing that in ChatGPT. It does not say this come from Dr. Huang University in Macau. No, 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 no. And thirdly, uh, over overtly restrictive laws that are coming as a result of ChatGPT and other generative AIs. Now we are being overreactive. We kind of try to go away from the normal established principles of copyright towards extremely restrictive laws. What can be done to bring or to strike the right balance? And these are just my opinions. They are not binding. Some people think whatever a judge says is binding. Unfortunately, I'm speaking here just as an academic because, like I was introduced, I still teach. I was appointed into the bench from the academia, and I still retain my position. Number one, we must revisit copyright frameworks to ensure that there is some sort of a remuneration for those works that have been used to train AI. We should encourage open licensing. If your work is being used out there, you should be. I very much support uh, monetary compensation to authors and creatives, because if we don't do that, we are shooting ourselves in the leg. We don't think computers and AI will continue to unleash or certify our literary and cultural tastes for a long time. I also think there is a need to establish ethical guidelines at every level. You should have ethical guidelines at the university level, at the ministry level, like former minister has wonderfully stated. He has spent a long time with educators, because it's like he's speaking like one of them on the challenges of preparing slides and stuff like that. I also think there should be promotion of public-private partnership, because the government cannot succeed alone by trying to enact laws. It's only upon learning from those who are directly affected by these laws and regulations can we really get out. Um, I need to say just a little bit that for the next 2 minutes or so, that AI is a blessing in disguise in developing countries. In Tanzania, for example, we used it researchers getting money from the state, and then they publish in international journals. You cannot access them. Student, I'm seeing through Google a paper published by my professor, but I am required to pay to access it. It's data from my country. It's knowledge of my professor. He was trained by taxpayers from my country. Huge company is restricting this knowledge from me. So there was no equity. Now at least you can see AI coming forcefully and say, okay, I don't want to promote these walls. I want equity. Yes. Thank you very much.
Imani, he was already started to allude the issue related to generative AI in the global south. So the second round of the questions, we will focus more on the perspective of global south. As you know, in the UN, leave no one behind is a central value. So let's look at Gen AI from the global south perspective. So I'll go for the second round. The first question will also go to Mohammed. You used to be a policymaker in Maldives, and would you please reflect on how generative AI create digital divides between global north and global south? What policymakers should consider to help reduce the divides and promote more equitable access to Gen AI, particularly in the small island countries like Maldives?
Gen AI, the potential of Gen AI is undoubtedly huge. Now, today, everyone expects actually, and should rightly expect Gen AI to support us in achieving the sustainable development goals, in supporting. So, if not for AI, how would we have we survived the pandemic, right? So AI is already supporting us through the darkest of our times. But what I fear most is that AI is like a new front that's open for digital transformation practitioners who are working in the global south. This is a new front on the war on digital divide, because we are already facing a lot of challenges trying to catch up with the rest of the world. And then now suddenly there is like Red Bull in the mix. So for me, Gen AI is like Red Bull. It gives digital transformation wings. Suddenly it's sprinting. And then those who can have this Red Bull, how are you going to catch up with them? Right? And in the global south, we just get drip, drip, drip of this Red Bull. So what can we do? So there's actually three aspects for digital divide that when we talk about digital divide, well, it's multifaceted, but the three aspects we talk about is access to technology, right? Is economic disparities, is the educational gaps. In all these three things, the global north have a huge advantage. The, the developed world is investing their wealth today in AI, and in particular in generative AI. In this, and not only that, there's a huge educational gap in that, because they are investing in the ecosystems in this developed part of the world, we are losing even our smartest brains to the developed world. So this further exacerbates the educational gap. And then again, access to this. Access to this is extremely limited. I'm sure you already heard 26% of the globe still remains offline, and 50% of that is in the Asia Pacific. So the island communities are particularly impacted. So what would I suggest, as somebody who's been for a long time a practitioner in digital transformation in the developing part of the world? I would say we got to find a narrative where even the developing countries or even the least developed countries need to prioritize investment in IT infrastructure. In the Maldives, over the last 5 years, we've gone from having just one submarine cable to the rest of the world to five submarine cables. We've gone from geostationary internet to Leo internet. So we kind of invested a lot to make sure that we are connected, and we are connected in every way possible, from under the water and from the sky down, right? But then you've got to make sure AI and digital literacy in the national curriculums. This is extremely important. But this is extremely hard as well, right? So I am actually working with the higher education in particular to develop AI modules that are multidisciplinary and taught for every student, from nurses to finance specialists. AI needs to be taught, right? Well, and then we got to actually develop an ecosystem where we can retain our smartest rather than lose them to the West. So governments and the private industry need to partner. The government alone cannot do it, as His Excellency has pointed out, right? And of course, nation states as well as educational institutions got to come up with policies for ethical use of AI. We cannot just jump into AI without proper national as well as institutional guidelines that safeguards our data and our privacy. And finally, we cannot do it alone. And that is why we are very glad to be working alongside institutions like the UNU. We've got to work together if we are going to have to actually bridge the AI divide and not let it divide us even further. Thank you.
Since Mohammed already mentioned the capacity building, so the next question for Antonios would be, if you were teaching teachers from the global south to integrate generative AI tools to their classroom, what would you tell them about the technical nature of the Gen AI tools to help them understand that Gen AI, understand the benefits and the limitations? So we're talking about the teachers' education in the global south.
So an excellent question. I think I would begin by highlighting that there are two sides to the tool. So on the one hand, we have the solution being used by teachers to make them more productive, and I think that was also mentioned by other panelists as well. So generating slides, generating these types of resources, perhaps assessments, and so on. So in that sense, it's quite powerful, and then there needs to be training for that. Um, and then the other half is, okay, so how can we use it in assignments, how for the students, right? So how can the students be using it to make them more productive, and so on. So one is understanding that there are the two dimensions, right? Um, the other, again mentioned by other panelists, is the digital divide, right? Luckily, there are free tools that one can use, but it's important also to recognize that they're restricted. So I think this goes a bit um, tangentially, right? But again, it would be quite wise for academics to kind of work together to figure out ways that they can gain access to the more advanced solutions, and also develop their own local tools, right, that they can use that might not be as limited, right? So a lot of the work is open source. So can we like run our own AI solutions locally with support and so on, and learn and develop in that area, right? So not as to be left behind, and so on. Uh, if I were teaching teachers from the global south, I would begin by highlighting the technical nature, right, of these tools. Um, so highlighting their benefits and their limitations, right? Uh, I think a good starting point, right, is what is Gen AI? In general, right? What can be used to generate, right? Text, images, music, code, right? So they get a good perspective of everything that it's possible to do. Because sometimes one is kind of limited to use cases that they've heard from others and so on. So I think a good overview is a great starting point. And um, then highlighting um, the the advantages and disadvantages, right? So it can summarize, explain, create content, but it doesn't think or understand, right? Even though it kind of it makes one think that they're thinking, it's not really like a human, right? As was mentioned by another panelist, it's just guessing, right? Probabilities, like what should come next. So in that sense. um, talk about what the open solutions are and what the paid solutions are, right? So one can use DALL-E for images. Um, Google Colab has an AI solution to generate code, right? So there's a lot out there. So what's there? And then not everything will be appropriate for every instructor. It kind of depends on what subject matter you're teaching, right? And how the AI works, as was mentioned before, right? So it may not be as easy to catch someone plagiarizing using ChatGPT in sociology, but it may be easier, right, if it's an intro to programming course. So it really depends on the context a bit, right? Um, so um, um, I see I'm running a bit short on time, so I think I'll stop there. But happy to expand on the conversation offline if anyone is interested.
Thank you, Antonios. May I please ask our technicians to put out the PowerPoint back again? And so the next question is for Mike. And you developed the AI assessment scale, which allows GenAI to be integrated into educational assessments while promoting academic integrity and the ethical use of these technologies. Would you please briefly introduce the scale and explain whether it can be used in the educational setting in the Global South? And if so, how?
Sure, thank you very much. So I was earlier just telling you about how really not feasible to say, well, we're just going to tell that students have used Gen AI tools, but especially not if you're in the global south, because these tools also cost a lot of money. And the most accurate tools, which could be used to have these conversations, are going to be the ones that are most expensive. And you, in the global south, maybe not going to be able to do this. So what's the alternative then? What can we do to change things up? Well, what I've developed is a framework for how we can actually introduce GenAI tools in an ethical way into assessment settings. Now, what this is a conversation starter between academics and students to say, look, we know that GenAI tools exist. We can't put the genie back in the bottle, as much as some academics would probably like to, I think, and say, let's just go back to where this is going, where we've been. So what we have is a situation where in the last 2 years, academics have been saying, oh, these students cheating using GenAI, yet still setting the same essay questions they've set for 20 years. But we're beyond that time now. Now is the time to change, and the AI assessment scale is a tool primarily for assessment redesign. It's a way to say, look, what are the important things you need to know, and how can you introduce GenAI in an effective way? So this starts off right from the very beginning, where we say, look, there's some times where we can't use any AI at all. Now, if you are a medical student and you are training future nurses and doctors, you want to ensure that when that student graduates and becomes a doctor, they actually know the fundamental biological aspects of a human. So how are you going to test that then? Well, you're not going to say, here's an assignment and write me about the human heart. You're going to put them in an exam hall or put them in a face-to-face assessment situation or a one-to-one Viva or a presentation and say, tell me about this situation. There's a corpse, demonstrate that you know how to cut that up before I'm going to let you practice on somebody else. You're not going to give them an assignment to say, tell me about how you'd cut up this corpse. Hopefully they're not going to be corpses that they're actually dealing with. Hopefully, when we graduate them, they're actually going to be able to deal with live humans. So sometimes we need this fundamental knowledge to be tested. And that's when we say, look, there's sometimes where we say there's no AI. And this is a secured assessment. But then as soon as we go away from a secured assessment, it is no longer possible to really control student use of GenAI. So if you can't control how the students are using GenAI tools, what you need to do is to change your assessments so that they focus on the things that you want to train them about. So for example, at level 2, this is where we're talking about process-based assessments. So you're a writing instructor and you want to teach students about how to plan an essay. So you say, what tools can you use to help you plan an essay? And then you submit that as your assessment, and then we explore it. Because when students graduate, they are going to be asked to do tasks by their employers, and what we want is for them to be able to finish that output. We don't say, oh, well, you've got to use, you're not allowed to use the internet to do your job, or you're not allowed to use the GenAI tools. So we've got to train students how to use them effectively for different situations. At the next level, we might say, we want to have AI as a collaborator. We want to train students how to use GenAI tools to draft text, to adjust what they are creating, to give them maybe even feedback on their work. And what we're looking at is this co-creation element rather than trying to say, oh, well, you wrote that part and the AI wrote that part. I write using GenAI tools, and by the time I've finished writing my journal paper, I can't tell myself which part I wrote by myself and which part the AI wrote, because it's all my ideas and it's all my voice. So the idea is we're trying to train students on maintaining their voice and maintaining a critical approach to how is the best way to use AI. And then we can go beyond that. We can say, there's some times where we want students to use AI tools specifically, and therefore we want to assess how well they're actually using GenAI tools. So we might say, rather than just, oh yeah, you can use AI for this, we say you must use AI for this, or show me your use of this tool to demonstrate this final problem. So what we say, this full AI. And this used to be our final version of the scale, a final level, but then we recognize that technology is changing so rapidly, we need to recognize the increasing multimodal use of AI, and that's why we have this final AI exploration level. Now in this AI exploration level, what we're looking at is solving problems that we don't necessarily even know exist yet. How can we use GenAI to solve problems that have been created by GenAI, or to do things in a different way, to fundamentally use GenAI to have this element of co-design and co-working between an educator, a student, and a GenAI tool to actually solve something new. Now, we're not going to be talking about K-12 students here on this, but maybe we're talking IB final project. Maybe we're looking at undergraduate dissertations, PhD students, master students. So this is how we can bring all of these together into this five-point scale, which can hopefully support students in using AI in a different way. So that's how I think we can use it in the Global South. It's a free framework. It doesn't require any licensing. If you want to take this and adapt this, we actually have tools available. So this one on the bottom, you can download a translation. We have this translated into 12 different languages already, with more to come. And we also have the design assets linked there. So it's just a Canva asset that you can change and adapt to your own context, because not everybody's the same. Every country's got different requirements, so we've got to be able to change accordingly. So some information about the AI assessment scale. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. I think the tools are very useful. And thinking about the Global South, probably the capacity building for the teachers and for the students would be more of a challenge compared to the Global North. That's just my impression. So the last question, but not least, we go back to our legal expert, Eliamani. Africa, because where you're from, will be the future of the world. I do believe so. It is expected to contribute to 62% of a global population growth in the next 25 years. Nigeria and Tanzania, specifically Tanzania, where you're from, expected to grow their population by 50 to 90%. How can Africa benefit from and contribute to the development of GenAI in education?
Thank you very much for that question, which is very close to my heart. And I will start by giving the similarities between Tanzania and Nigeria as an entry point to address the question. And both Tanzania and Nigeria are hosts to the Nelson Mandela African Institutions of Science and Technology. It's unfortunate that many people don't know that the late Nelson Mandela had a vision of science, technology, and innovation powering the next generation of Africans and increasing competitiveness of the continent. And as a result, 4 institutions were established named after him. And I come from the one that is in Arusha, Nelson Mandela African Institution of Science and Technology. That's what you can see, that I'm an adjunct faculty member there. And this has been our way of positioning ourselves to benefit from the global innovation scale and also to contribute. So just like how we established Nelson Mandela institutions in the past, the one in Arusha was established in 2011, and the one in Nigeria was established in 2007. You can Google about them, and you will see that quite a number of world-class innovations have been happening in these institutions and contributing meaningfully towards empowering the next generations of Africans. Our current president, who happens to be a lady, a female head of state, we are very proud of our President Samia Suluhu Hassan. She has pioneered STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, as the way to prepare the next generation of Tanzanians and Africans in general to contribute meaningfully to innovation. And just last week, she reshuffled the cabinet, and when addressing the nation on that, she told the minister of ICT, who I'm told is on his way coming to attend this, that his ministry has been narrowed so that he can focus specifically on ICT to ensure that he explores whatever is going to help Tanzania to leapfrog and compete on all fronts in terms of ICT. We have a long way to go, and this is how I want to finish my contribution by asking everyone to ensure that you give a hand to the global south. Personally, I got a scholarship to study my master's and PhD in Germany by the generous scholarship of the Max Planck Society. Many of my age mates studied in the US, in the UK. We are not seeing this happening anymore in the larger scale. So we still need, bridges to be built so that the North and the South can share expertise and share knowledge. That's how we can position ourselves not only to benefit but also to contribute meaningfully to Gen AI and STEM in general.
Thank you, Elimani. So, well, conscious of time, the session has to end. But I would like to encourage all of you, whoever would like to have an exchange of ideas with the panel members, please come up and we can have individual conversations. And for those online, sorry, we cannot accommodate the questions. Feel free to write to us and write to us and we can have an exchange later. All right. Thank you very much, dear panelists, and thank you for being here and listening to the session. Thank you.